Oh, let me hit the yeah, what they are looking in when they invite you for the interview. So thank you very much, Chloe, for accepting this invitation and being ready to share with our students the all the insiders' perspective of the interview. And the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. I've never done a presentation with EdUSA Armenia before, so this is wonderful. I'm very excited to be here. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, get right to the presentation. So as was said, we're going to be talking a little bit about preparing for graduate school interviews, a little bit about funding, things to also prepare as you maybe start on campus if you do decide to apply, or if you've already applied and you've been admitted to a university in the United States, things to kind of think about, resources to look for as you start on campus. So as I said, that's kind of what we're going to go over, preparing for graduate school interviews. I do have a little bit of advice from a current graduate student. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here this evening, but he did send me a couple slides of just his advice for students if they are going to do any sort of graduate school interviews for their programs. Usually, just to give you some context, interviews usually happen most of the time after you apply, and it's kind of the final thing before you find out whether or not you've been admitted. Sometimes you already get a letter of admission and then they interview you afterwards. So it just kind of depends on the school. It's going to vary, but he had some advice on his particular experience. And then, like I said, things to consider once you're on campus, and then a little bit about funding. All right, so before the interview, obviously you may have just applied to one school, two schools, three schools, but it is important before the interview to make sure that you have a place to put all your notes from the interview. It's definitely important to take notes while you're in the interview, have maybe a piece of paper or something like that that you can write notes down on, because you're going to be getting a lot of information during that interview. So it's not just the school interviewing you, you are also taking the time to interview the school and finding out more information about their program and about what they may offer as part of that, because you will obviously have to make a decision if you applied to more than one school, which program you want to go to, which program maybe fits your goals the best. So this is a way to kind of just organize yourself before the start of the interview. So you can create, a Google sheet, something like this, an Excel sheet that includes the program name, maybe the faculty interests and their projects if you don't know that already, or if you got more details during the interview about what they might be working on. Obviously the funding. So kind of learning a little bit more about that and getting any other additional questions answered that you may not have known. The program culture, kind of learning about just in general what the program is like, what they kind of expect of students, the ideal type of student they're hoping to see, any benefits that might come with your funding. So sometimes when you get assistantships at certain universities, it comes with benefits like, health insurance for students, things like that. So you might want to ask that. Any required materials that you need to either bring to campus or that you need to provide after the interview. Sometimes they have maybe some follow-up questions or maybe a follow-up document you need to sign. And so that is something to ask as well. And then any deadlines for any of that information that they need, maybe a decision by or things like that. So you can just organize the information like this if that helps you. And then again, when you're interviewing with different schools or when you're, getting last minute information, you can add it to this Excel. So some universities, like I said, will require you to complete an interview before you start graduate school or as part of the admissions process after you apply. So not every school is going to require this. So it really depends on the program you apply to, as well as the school in general. So at the University at Albany, we have certain programs that absolutely require interviews. It's kind of expected, whereas other programs don't require it at all. So you just have to ask if you want to, you can ask in advance. You can ask when you're doing the application process, is an interview part of this? A lot of times you'll see interviews as part of PhD applications. So if anyone out there is applying for a PhD, this is sometimes very common in the world of PhD programs that they want to interview you before as part of the application process before they give a decision. So these are just a few little hints for success, one of the first that I have is just have your questions ready. So I kind of talked about before how it's not just a process of the school interviewing you, you are also interviewing the school to make sure it's a good fit for you, to make sure that you understand what is expected of you and kind of the benefits and the programs that they offer, the projects or research you could be working on. So these are just a few questions that you may want to ask. If you're not going to be interviewing for a graduate school, that's okay. You can still ask these questions of admissions teams, of faculty, of staff at the university. You can still ask these questions. These are just good questions to ask in general when you are considering a school that you might attend and you might spend time attending. So these are, again, just some example questions. You can kind of see through the list. They're just kind of at random. So you can ask, how long does the program take to complete? That's really important, especially for PhD programs, because those can vary depending on your research project, depending on the faculty you work with. They are usually between 4 and 6 years for most PhDs. So it's a good thing to ask. Most master's programs, just for your information, are usually between 1 and 3 years. But you can also ask that too, as how long does the program take to complete? Tell me more about research opportunities. Who are the faculty that are going to be working on these projects? What do the job prospects look like after graduation? So this is a big thing. What do your applicants and what do your attendees to this program do after graduation? Are there career advisors in the program? Can you get experience through internships or other field placement experience to, again, kind of help you pad your resume? What do the assistantships look like? What are the duties? Usually with most assistantships, it's usually teaching or research. And for those of you who are not familiar with what an assistantship is, this is something to always ask admissions committee members about. An assistantship is a teaching or a research position that is offered through a graduate program that can help you attend graduate school and also can help with the cost of tuition. So it's a really wonderful way to get your graduate school either partially or fully funded in some instances, depending on the school and the type of funding they offer. So always ask about assistantships. So if you're not clear about assistantships beforehand, please make sure you ask during the interview. Again, what are the two duties? Is it teaching? Is it research? The amount of funding provided? How often do you need to apply for these assistantships? Is it once a year, or do you have to just apply one time? So sometimes if you have to renew the assistantship between multiple years, you may have to apply again for the funding. So just make sure you understand that. Any professional development opportunities, such as presenting research, kind of learning how you can grow in the program. How would you describe the community of this program and the community on campus? What is the culture of the university? You definitely want to know that and just kind of learn about the resources for students that are available. Obviously, at this point, since you're doing an interview, you want to know the timeline for an admissions decision after the interview. So if I complete this interview, how long does it take for me to know whether or not I've gotten into the program? Maybe you already know. Maybe they just want to interview you before you start the program and just ask you a series of questions. Sometimes that will happen, but usually they interview you before an admissions decision has been made. So you kind of want to know the timeline of when they are finally going to give you that admissions decision of whether or not you are admitted into the university. And then it might be different for funding in terms of the timeline to know whether or not you got funding. So obviously asking them, what is the timeline for admission and what is the timeline for any funding notifications? All right. So again, the whole point of the interview is for the university to get to know you outside of the application. They will likely ask you questions as well. They want to know whether or not, again, you're a good fit for the university, whether or not it seems like their program would fit your goals. You know, they're also going to be asking you quite a few questions. So before the interview, it's really important to practice commonly asked questions to yourself aloud or with someone who can give you feedback. That's the ideal, if you can work with a teacher or an advisor or a trusted adult to help you through some of the questions that maybe they will ask you during the interview. interview and kind of rehearsing some of your answers just so it's, clean and you kind of understand sort of, what you want to say to the admissions committee, get your thoughts in order. Really, really important. And many of the questions may mirror what you discussed in your personal statement. So if you wrote a personal statement as part of your application, they will likely ask you questions that are similar to maybe what you answered in the personal statement. And again, just as a side, for those of you who don't know what a personal statement is, or if you've not heard of that as part of the application process, it is an essay. It's exactly what it sounds. It's an essay, usually 1 to 2 pages, that basically just goes through why you want to apply to a particular program, and why you're choosing a particular university, and what your future career goals are. So that's what a personal statement is. So they will ask you questions that likely mirror a lot of the things you may have already answered in the personal statement. So a couple of the things they could ask you is, why did you choose this program? Obviously. What are your short-term goals in the program and future goals after graduation? What experience do you have in this field, and how are these experiences going to help you be successful in this program? What are your research interests? How do you see yourself contributing to the school, and how can the school contribute to your particular goals? Are you considering other schools? They could ask this question, and you can be honest about this. You don't have to say, oh no, you are the only one I'm considering. You can be honest. You can briefly list 1 or 2 schools that you may be considering, and then just kind of redirect the conversation to back to the school that you're interviewing for and why you are interviewing for them. So that's a way to kind of answer that question. A lot of people are thrown by that. So it's okay to answer it, but just kind of redirect to back to the school that you're interviewing for. So another helpful thing that might be useful as kind of preparation before the interview is kind of reviewing basics of the program. So going on the website and looking once more at the school's research emphasis, the projects the faculty are working on, kind of reviewing in your mind what made you apply to the university. You may be applying for multiple schools, so a lot of times this information can kind of blend together, and sometimes you can get programs sort of mixed together and their details mixed up. So it's really important to go back before you interview for a particular school and just make sure you understand all the information for that particular school so you don't get information mixed up. You don't have to memorize everything on the website. That is not expected of you. You just need to, again, have an understanding of why you wanted to apply to that particular school. And again, the university's website can be really helpful in just reviewing it, getting notes together, making sure you understand. And then you can also review your personal statement. If it's been a while since you applied, reviewing your personal statement that you completed for that application can be helpful. Again, just to kind of go through your thoughts and make sure everything is in order. A few more hints for success during interviews. The first thing is that you will likely, as an international student, be able to complete these interviews virtually. Usually that's how it works. Sometimes they will have students come in person, but a lot of times, at least initially, they will have you interview virtually, usually over Zoom. So it's really important to calculate time differences. If you are interviewing for a US university, the interview could be during the US workday. So just making sure that you're very clear on the scheduled time. And you can confirm that. You can email whoever invited you to the interview, whether it's a faculty member or whether it's a member of the admissions team at that school. You can always say, I just want to double check on the time since there's a big time difference on that particular day. So again, making sure that you know the time difference and also any materials or information you might need to bring with you for the interview in case they want to review something like that. If you are interviewing virtually, it's still important to dress professionally. Make sure you have a Zoom background set up, or that your physical background, wherever you're interviewing or wherever you're sitting, is maybe neutral, organized, is just kind of very neat for the interview. And that'll help you feel less stressed as well if you're in kind of a calm environment and you can concentrate. Before that day, always test any technical stuff. So Wi-Fi, test your Zoom account, make sure other tech needs are taken care of in advance so you can troubleshoot in the days before the interview. You don't want to have those kind of difficulties in the last minute before you're trying to log on to Zoom. That can be obviously very, very stressful. So just make sure that's all taken care of before the interview. As I kind of said, trying to conduct the interview as much as you can. Sometimes it's hard, but in a distraction-free environment, someplace quiet. If you need to go to a library and go maybe into one of the study rooms, if the library has study rooms, maybe do that, and just try to find a quiet location where again, you can just kind of fully concentrate on the questions you're being asked. And then, as I said before, keeping notes during the interview, keeping track of the information you receive, and then putting those into the Excel sheet after you're done. So you can just keep track of the information that you are receiving from the different schools if you are interviewing for more than one school. And finally, it's okay to be nervous. Everybody gets nervous with these interviews. Really, this process, if you are required to interview for your graduate program, is really just a chance for you to meet the people that you might be working with for the next few years, learn a little bit more about the program, making sure it's a good fit for you. They're trying to find out if your goals fit their program as well. So it's really just a process of that. If you look at it as a conversation, it makes it a little bit less nerve-wracking. You're just having a conversation with these individuals. So it's okay to be nervous, but really it's just about gaining information and making sure you're making the right decision when you apply for a particular university. So after the interview, please remember to breathe, but also in those coming days, make sure you send an email of thanks to the committee or the interview contact. It can be through an email. That's okay, especially obviously as an international student being overseas. It's okay to send them a thank you by email. Keep it professional and brief. Just reiterate your enthusiasm for the program, maybe thank them again for the interview opportunity, and include something you maybe enjoyed learning during the interview process, something very brief. I enjoyed learning about Professor so-and-so's research project, that sort of thing. And then if you don't have the contact information for everyone you met in the interview, sometimes you can find it online, or you can always ask your contact for the interview for the additional emails of the people that you met if you would like to send them a thank you note as well. So, and then send the email within a day or two of the interview's completion. And then after the decision deadline, so let's say you interviewed for a program and they say, okay, by January 30th, you should hear back from us about the decision. If you do not hear back by January 30th, it is okay to reach out and ask the contact if they have maybe an updated schedule for decisions. If it's been a while, like let's say maybe it's a couple months, maybe reintroduce yourself, let them know you completed the interviews just so they can kind of remember, because they receive emails from lots of people. So just kind of remind them of that, and that you are inquiring as to an updated timeline of when admission decisions will be sent. Normally, admissions decisions are sent, pretty well on time if they give you a timeline, but sometimes they aren't. So you can always reach back out if there are any, if you have any questions on that. So I'm going to give a little bit of context and kind of a summary for the things that we talked about by bringing in one of our graduate students. So like I said, he couldn't be here this evening, unfortunately, but he did give me a few slides about his personal experience. So this is Pierce. He's one of our graduate assistants at the University at Albany. And he interviewed for a psychology PhD program. That's where he currently is right now at the University at Albany. He's in a psychology PhD program. But before he started with us, he interviewed in person at 3 research universities when he was applying to various PhD programs. So in these interviews and these experiences, he had quick back-to-back meetings with faculty members. These were formal interviews. And then he had current student meetings. So he got to meet current students and kind of ask them about their experiences, hear a little bit more about what they were learning, why the program worked for them, what their experiences were. And then each meeting was about 25 minutes, and there were usually 4 to 6 meetings. So they were kind of back-to-back. It was kind of a fast-paced process, but that was his experience. In each meeting with a faculty member, he was asked again about his experience, what he wanted to research in the future. When he met with students, he had a chance to ask about their experience, like we talked about, how they felt about the location of the university, what they like to do, what sort of campus resources there were available. So those were kind of the questions that came up as part of his interview. Some of his just kind of advice in the summary of what we're talking about with interviews. rehearsing a few anecdotes, kind of like we talked about. So practicing that stuff out loud, kind of like we said, be able to speak fluently and conversationally about why you are applying for this university and what, is important to you about the graduate school experience, what you're looking for, highlighting your competencies and research skills. Also, again, making sure it's a good fit in terms of the department or the faculty members, the professors you'll be working with, researching the qualities of the department, that what they're looking for in students. And again, obviously making sure that those line up with your goals as well. And then career goals, being able to confidently answer, what do you hope to do with, this research in the future, or what do you hope to do as a career after you graduate? Being able to answer those things is really, really important. So that was just a little bit of his advice as he went through this process. So I'm going to switch a little bit to a new topic, kind of discussing things to consider once you're on campus as a student. So resources to look for, things to kind of think about if you choose to study in the United States, just some things to kind of look for and consider. Most universities who accept international students will have an office that is dedicated specifically to helping international students while they're on campus. So they have resources such as, again, they take students on trips throughout the community, kind of learning about the resources in the community, not just on campus, but also connecting you with where you're going to be living. They have a lot of different activities, sometimes group activities where you can get to know other international students and other students on campus. So it's a really, really great resource. And again, most universities have this. At the University at Albany, our particular program is called the International Student and Scholar Services Office. It goes by different names, but it's similar to this. And so again, they can help you sort of transition to life as a student in the US. And we know that that's kind of a difficult thing sometimes, moving far away. So they want to make sure that you have all the support necessary for that. And they can also issue or assist with questions related to maintaining visa status, because regulations like that are changing a lot. So they often have some good information about that. Also thinking about or asking about CPT and OPT. If you are unfamiliar with this, CPT is curricular practical training, which is a program kind of like an internship that you complete while you're a student. And it just allows you to get experience outside of the classroom and kind of build your resume as part of that program. So always make sure you ask about curricular practical training opportunities. You may also want to ask about optional practical training, which is something that you do after graduation. And this can be something that is available as of right now for students who are in a variety of different fields. If you are in a STEM field, so science, technology, engineering, math, you can extend, as of right now, you can extend the time that you are in the US if you are in a STEM program. So that's something to think about and consider and ask questions about. Obviously, in the future, if you're looking at something like this and kind of building your resume, just making sure you understand what those options are. And then most universities have writing centers and research librarians that can assist you once you're on campus with research and writing papers, as that's going to be a big part of graduate study. So always make sure you are asking about that, because there's a lot of people to help you with just kind of learning how to be a student in a graduate study. Other resources to kind of look for, we have disability and inclusion services. So if you are an individual who has the experience of having a assistance with, certain types of learning or equal access to education. If you have a documented or academic disability, this is an office that is on usually almost all universities, and they can assist you with making sure that you have access to your studies, you're getting the resources and support that you need to complete your studies. So if that is your experience, please make sure that you ask for help, because this is something that's really important in the university and that can help students, again, if that is your experience. And then most universities have medical and mental health care. So many universities have on-campus medical facilities, such as pharmacies, and they may have connections to hospitals too. So just making sure you know that, and again, who to reach out to and ask for support if that's needed. And then safety and security on campus. So overall, university campuses remain very safe places in the U.S. However, if you should experience something that makes you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, usually most universities have a campus security officers and a campus security kind of team. And you can always reach out to them if you, again, experience something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And you always, if you are on campus, always make sure that you have the campus security office's phone number saved in your phone, just in case. So these are, again, are just kind of some random pieces of advice to make sure that you know that there's a lot of support available for when you're on campus. And then quick information about funding. This is something that obviously is part of your thought process. If you have already applied to universities, it's part of the process right now of kind of thinking, okay, where do I look for funding? Am I going to be awarded funding? And just a few things to consider as you're looking. So Education USA is a really good place to look for funding and get assistance looking for different types of funding. So obviously they do not provide funding, but you can connect with advisors to discuss how to strengthen maybe an application for funding. And they can also inform you of any scholarships that might be available within your home country. So they're a really wonderful organization, obviously. We love them. And so, again, use them because they're a great resource. Other resources that may be outside of the university are scholarship databases. So an example is EduPass. This is a website that just lists different scholarships for international students. There are also foundations. So an example of this is the Armenian National Committee of America. A lot of times in the past, they have offered funding for international students. And then Fulbright. Fulbright is a really great program, very competitive, but it's a really fantastic program that can help you with just funding and also just professional development. They do a really great job creating those opportunities for students. And then within the university, so you always obviously want to look for funding within the university and ask about funding in the university. So some of the things that you can ask about and different types of funding that might be available. One is merit funding. So this is funding based on past academic performance, GPA. So you can ask if they have merit funding available. Again, we talked about assistantships. They may also be known as TA, RA, or GA positions. So if you see that, that's what they're talking about. Fellowships, again, those are often you have to apply for those pretty far in advance. Sometimes they're pretty competitive through the school, but definitely ask about them because they can offer a good amount of funding. And then many students are able to work on campus. As of right now, under federal visa regulations, you can work up to 20 hours per week on campus. So if you are looking for an on-campus job, that is something to consider as well. And then again, just as a note, application deadlines for funding opportunities may vary from the admissions deadline. So it may be 2 different dates. So just make sure that you're always checking with the university website or confirming with the admissions team at the university if you have any questions about when the application for admission is due and when the application for funding is due, because sometimes those are 2 separate deadlines. And then you can continue to look for funding opportunities even after you become a student. Some opportunities at certain universities may require you to have a semester completed before you apply. So don't give up if, let's say, you were not given funding initially. So sometimes you can apply for funding at a later time once you become a student. Very quickly, I want to go over a few things about my university. So this is the university at Albany, which is a university in the state of New York. We're located about 2 hours north of New York City. We are actually the capital of New York. Albany is the capital of New York. And so it's a really wonderful place to learn about government. And there's a lot of nonprofit organizations. A lot of tech industries are here as well. So if you're interested in tech, it's a great place to be. The university is a research institution. So it means that we are focused. All of our programs are really focused on the production and creation of research. So if you're interested in doing research, this is a wonderful place to be. We have about about 17,000 students, and they come from nearly 100 different countries. So it's a really beautiful, diverse campus. We're very proud of that. And we have about 150 different graduate programs. So there's something for everybody. So if you are interested, you can scan that little QR code, and I will get that information from you, and you can fill out a little form, and you can get on our email list if you would like to. It's entirely up to you, but if you would like to get on our email list, that is great. And then my contact information, I'm going to switch the slides here. My contact information is here. So that's cglenn@albany.edu. If you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you. My colleague here, Soha Acosta, she is also fantastic, and she can answer questions from prospective international students as well. Again, please ask questions no matter what university you apply to. That's the number one thing I always tell students is you are welcome to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Nobody is born knowing how to apply to graduate school or knowing how to apply to schools in general. So it always takes, time and steps. And so it's totally okay to reach out if you have any confusion or if you just want to learn more. We're happy to talk to you. So I'm going to stop sharing and get to your questions. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah, and before that, I wanted to say a huge thank you to you, Chloe, for this very well-rounded, speaking about everything presentation, really in depth and very important. And the insights, I believe, very important for students. So thank you very much for taking the time and sharing all this important information with our students. And then I understand that there is a lot of information, yeah, and you have to still digest it, but feel free to ask your questions. You can either write them in chat box and I'll read them, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. And we are starting to accept questions now. Okay, don't be shy.
Yeah, please, this
Yeah.
is your time. I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, before students get prepared to ask questions, maybe I'll go first and ask question. So what would you recommend students who, I know that there are universities that interview is not a mandatory part of the application or revision of the application, but still they kind of welcome students to reach out maybe first to let them know about their application in general, their interest, and also invite for the interview. How acceptable it is for you, and what would you recommend?
So for them to reach out and ask about
Yes.
that, oh,
Mm-hmm.
sure, yeah, that's totally fine. I mean, if you're not clear as to what if they're going to be requiring an interview or what the next steps are, we get questions like that all day, every day, and that's totally fine. We want students to not be worried about the next steps. So yes, it's totally acceptable to reach out and just say, I've completed my application. I just want to make sure what the next steps are so that I'm prepared. You're welcome to ask that of the admissions team. Sometimes, and there's a differentiation when you often contact universities. So an example is the University at Albany. We have a graduate school that just helps with the application process, but then we have all these different programs that have their own process for how they admit students. So oftentimes we will say, we don't have the answer to that, but we're going to send you over to, let's say you applied to the business program. We're going to send you over to the School of Business, and they can tell you, what their process is. So sometimes you may have to talk to multiple people, but that is totally fine to reach out, and we can direct you to the right place. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a follow-up question on this. So, whether you would advise students to reach out to faculty members directly if they have some question related to assistantship, fellowship, or stuff like this.
Yeah, so you're welcome to reach out. A lot of schools will have, and this is an example as well from our university, but many universities have this, where they will have a program contact listed on the website. So it's a person that is specifically there to answer questions about the program. Often they are a faculty member sometimes. Sometimes they're just a graduate advisor, but that's great too because they will know about classes and things like that. So always look on the website for the contact for that particular program because a lot of times they're the ones who are going to, be familiar with questions on assistantships, questions on what classes look like, what the academics look like. So absolutely. If you can't find that on the website, you're welcome to reach out to that school and maybe talk to the graduate school first and say, who is it that I contact? And they can let you know. But yes, and the other thing is that if you see somebody on the university's website that maybe is doing the type of research you want to do, you can say, hey, I know I'm talking to you, but can I maybe talk to this person who's doing the research that I'm interested in? You want to make sure you do that research in advance so that you feel comfortable with the school you're applying to and that you make sure it's a good fit for you. So I am all for people asking questions. The thing to kind of remember when you're reaching out to faculty is that oftentimes they are very busy people. So they're teaching classes, they're doing their own research, they're kind of running around all over the place. So it may take a few days for them to answer. But just, if you have to reach out again, or if you have to go back and say, hey, is there someone else, that I can reach out to? You're welcome to do that. But I always say, make sure it's a good fit for you before you take this big step in applying to a university. Just make sure it's a good fit for you, and researching is part of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I believe someone raised hand for question. So if the question is still valid,
Okay, it was me.
okay, go ahead.
I want to know about research, but dear it, I want to know about our background. Like, if we had an experience, a huge experience in the different spheres, not aligned with that organization, not aligned with that program. Is it necessary to mention about it?
Oh, like to talk about the research you may have had in like a particular, like in your university or in your past, like what your experiences are?
Yes, if I have experiences like a lot, but not aligned with that university or with that program.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, in fact, the majority of the time, that's how it will likely be. In terms of, let's say, maybe you're coming from maybe a bachelor's degree or an undergraduate degree, let's say in political science, and you want to jump to maybe a degree in social work. So obviously two different fields, maybe your experiences doesn't totally align with the things that they're looking for, but you obviously learned skills during that time when you were achieving your undergraduate degree. You have transferable skills that can apply to that new program that you are wanting to apply to. So just because your experience doesn't align exactly with, maybe the program, you can still talk about what you learned from those experiences and how they apply to this new program you want to apply to. That being said, you always want to make sure and talk to the university in advance of applying, just to see, do I need to have a background that is really aligned with what you're looking for? Do I need to have a certain degree in order to apply, a certain undergraduate degree in a certain field in order to apply? You just want to make sure you ask those questions in advance of applying. But if they say, yeah, an example at the University of Albany, our business program takes people from all sorts of academic backgrounds. So we've had people from they had an undergrad in fashion design and they decided to go into, but it's really, really different. So they are open to that. A lot of programs are really open to that. You just have to ask in advance. Some are not, an example, a lot of times engineering programs are like, no, you must have a degree in engineering before you continue in engineering in a master's or a PhD. But a lot of programs are very open to people of just different academic backgrounds. So just always ask. Yeah.
Okay, and one more question.
Mhm.
I want to ask about the skills. What skill do we need to preferable mention in
Mhm.
our interview, like leadership skill or I don't know, communication skills?
Yeah, so it's going to be a mix of all of that. So if you have leadership experience, that's wonderful. If you have, again, communication, collaboration experience, research experience, you can always ask in advance when you start the application, what are you looking for in an applicant? That can be one of the questions that you talk to the school about, what are you looking for? And again, sort of communicating those transferable skills if maybe your experience doesn't totally align with what they're looking for. But yes, it's going to be a mix of all of that. And you want to make sure that whatever you talk about sort of relates back to the program you're applying to. So if you have leadership skills, okay, how does that apply to the program that you want to get into? How does that apply to, if you're applying for a master's in physics, let's say, how does that apply to the master's in physics? How does that make you a stronger candidate? So you just always want to redirect that back to that point that, you know, this is why that all these experiences have made me prepared for this. So definitely.
Okay, thank you for
Thank you so
sharing
much.
with us your knowledge, because it means a lot to us.
Of
And
course.
thank you, Miss Ina, for creating this webinar. Like, it is very useful.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. I'm happy to see not only our CCC students, but also general advisors joining. So thank you for following us. Guys, do you have any other questions?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. I have one question. It's a bit different, but usually in interviews for international students still knowing English, sometimes there are questions like it runs from your mind or you didn't answer however you wanted, maybe because of language barrier or something. I wanted to know, is it okay, or for example, after interview in educational atmosphere, to write in summary, for example, in this question, I wanted to elaborate more, or I meant this, because in job interviews, usually I had this experience and sometimes I wanted to reach out and add something more. So I really wanted to hear your perspective on this, how to approach it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So sometimes you can. Sometimes they may have follow-up questions after the interview. A lot of times they will say, is there anything else you want to add? Sometimes they will email you and ask for that. Other times, and this is why the preparation part is so important, is that practicing the type of questions that they may ask you will help you kind of, you don't want to act like you're reading from a script necessarily, but you want to make sure you're hitting on those key points and you're preparing an answer in advance that allows you to say what you want to say initially. And so that's what I would say, is just trying to, as much as you can, even though it's very nerve-wracking to do all that practice sometimes, it is really helpful to just hear your answers, you write them down, write down exactly what you want to get across, make sure that it's clear when you're speaking it. So like I talked about, having a trusted person give you feedback, listen to your answers and say, okay, well, what did you mean by that? When you say that, what did you mean by that? Add more detail to that. You have someone really give you feedback in advance of the interview, so that by the end, you know, you don't have that sensation of, oh my goodness, I didn't say this, or I didn't give details on that in the way I wanted to. So having that practice in advance can really help you feel calmer about what you're going to say. And you can always, and this is totally okay to say during the interview, I'm just going to take a second to gather my thoughts on that, and just, you know, you need to breathe. If you need to look at your notes, that's okay. And you know, you can kind of go at your own pace. You know, you don't want to rush yourself. You don't want to be cruel to yourself in that way during that time. It's already stressful enough. But doing that preparation in advance can be really helpful to, you know, make you feel confident on that day.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. So do we have, I think, maybe one more last question? Okay, maybe then, Chloe, if you don't mind, I'll ask you just to share the screen again, or put your contact details in the chat
Sure.
box. Sometimes students have, you know, those late coming questions. Just
Yeah.
if they want to, I don't know, maybe ask more about the university, yours university specific, or any other questions. If you don't mind, guys, this is the email address. So again, thank you very much for joining and sharing with us this important information. And then have a lovely continuation of the day.
Yes, thank you all so much for your wonderful questions. I appreciate you all, and have a great evening. Thank you again.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.